Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone, welcome to Healing the Spirit. In this conversation, you're going to be hearing from Natasha Levinger, who is a therapeutic intuitive and a dear friend of mine, someone whose work I deeply admire and benefit from. Natasha's been on the podcast a couple times before, and this time we recorded a conversation about what Natasha means when she talks about cultivating self-trust and remembering ourselves through the lens of learning psychic skills and awakening our psychic abilities. We discuss what it means to find neutrality, which I have found to be a concept that many people talk about, but is perhaps not always defined with clarity or precision or nuance. And also, we talk about how learning these intuitive and psychic skills can assist with helping us feel grounded as we live through challenging times in our collective. As you will hear in a second, I love talking to Natasha. I think her insights are brilliant and spot on, and I love Natasha's ability to communicate and break down concepts that may seem far out in ways that are easy to digest and understand, at least to my brain. If you enjoyed this conversation, you may also want to check out her new offering, which focuses on psychic development and the cultivation of self-trust. It's called A Spell of Remembering, which is, in my opinion, such a beautiful title. And it starts on Monday, March 25th, 2024. Details will be in the show notes below for this episode. You're going to find the links to register and all of the information. So before we get to the conversation, let me read Natasha's bio. Natasha Levinger is a therapeutic intuitive, energy healer, and author of the book Healing Your Inner Child, Reparenting Yourself for a More Secure and Loving Life. She spends much of her time deep diving into all aspects of spiritual and emotional healing in the search to uncover patterns that stop us from being all that we are. Sharing those discoveries with others to help them feel free and fulfilled is her passion and life's work. All right, here's my conversation with Natasha Levinger. Welcome, Natasha. Thank you for coming back to the podcast.
Yay!
You're one of my favorite guests. You're one of my favorite people. So it always feels like truly such a joy to have a conversation with you.
That's how I feel. I feel we talk over WhatsApp, and I feel like I'm always like, I'm always like, oh God, I'm talking too much.
That gives me permission to also be free with my expression. So it's good.
Do you have an open throat center?
Yeah. Everything's
You
open
do.
in my body graph.
Not
Except for my
everything.
G center and my sacral. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I have an open throat center too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But no, because all the open ones, then you would be a reflector, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not a reflector.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You're a generator with almost all. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Sorry to die.
I'm like minimum definition generator is what I've been calling myself. Yeah.
That's so interesting.
But it's really nice to have that sacral definition, I think, because it gives me something to anchor to. And the more I experiment with it, the stronger it feels. Mm-hmm. The more I can feel like, oh, this is my sacral speaking to me.
You mean the more you, I wonder if that's true for any center. Like if you
Maybe.
were really to focus on, I bet with a defined center, that would be more true. But like the more you focus on something, then, or on one of them, then you would learn more like, oh, this is who I am when I'm in this space, you
Yes,
know?
exactly. Exactly.
And
I
actually,
definitely agree with that.
yeah, it's funny. I didn't mean to already start talking about this, but part of um well, so I'm teaching this class, which you know, part of why I wanted to be here to talk about these themes in my class, and I
Hmm.
appreciate you having me on to do that. Um,
Yeah.
but so part of it actually is like the first class, even if you really know about intuition and like you're familiar with your own intuition, it's
Hmm.
just so fascinating. I get so excited about it because it's so like, um, it's just endless. But anyway,
Hmm.
the reason I'm bringing that up is because one of the things as I'm writing that first class is like your and everybody's intuition speaks to them differently,
Yeah.
and so like if you focus on like, okay, how do I feel, how does my intuition show up if I am focused on my feelings or my knowing, or
Mm.
or my,
Hmm.
feeling in my sacral, even if you aren't a sacral generator, um you can see how like you energy speaks to us in all these different ways all the
Yes.
time. It's just so
Yes.
exciting. And so yeah, so if you're like, "Oh, I'm really going to anchor into my sacral," then you start noticing all the ways like, "Oh, I feel this in my body when this is happening," or
Hmm.
like I'm getting a yes or a no even if you are a reflector and everything's open.
Yeah,
It's just
exactly.
such an alive language energy.
Yes, I think that's why, in my experience, pairing energy work as well as divination into models like astrology or human design is really helpful, right? I think they
Mm.
all speak to our lived experience from different perspectives, and
Mhm.
bringing them together in a way that, honors each system's individual premises, right? And like, if you are sincere
Mhm.
about studying each of these systems and these practices, then I think
Mhm.
within you, in your lived experience, you start to be able to weave them in a very seamless way. Hmm.
Mm. You
Hmm.
mean like knowing yourself through those modalities? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think the modalities, right? So, for example, if you look at astrology and human design, which I call models of reality, right? They
Mm.
give you something to bounce off of, right? Because the
Right,
premise
right,
for astrology or human design is your chart or your body graph, it's fixed, right?
right.
It's fixed to like the time you were born. So this is the sets of energies that you're working with throughout your life. But
Hmm.
then when you work with reality, the experience of the archetypes that are presented in your astrology chart or your body graph is always shifting, because we as humans are always shifting, right?
Hmm.
From the vantage point of our lived experience, we're always shifting. And so I think that's
Hmm.
where having those tools like energy or psychic tools, and then learning divination and grounding divination in like certain premises that I think help make it not about like necessarily fortune telling, but about really understanding
Hmm.
what you are experiencing right now in your reality, right,
Yeah.
can really help you navigate your life.
Oh, I
Hmm.
mean, yeah. The yeah, so for how I learned first was through the chakra system,
Hmm.
and through knowing my own subtle energy body. Um Yeah, that's like my framework.
Yeah.
And then when I learn other frameworks like human design and astrology, it's so fascinating, and it does
Hmm.
like help help me understand maybe like why my like why my third chakra is always having problems or whatever is like closing or like taking everything in, because I'm a Libra moon and I want everyone to get along and
Yeah.
whatever. But it's like, yeah, but so that helps me structure it is the chakra system. But
Mm.
also I was just thinking about how like there's so much hypervigilance in the world,
Mm.
through
Mm-hmm.
trauma and also just like systemically. And I feel like it's since the pandemic, it's just getting worse and worse, but maybe that's my like white privilege perspective. I know it's always been really bad for a lot of people, but
Mm.
um anyway, I think that's part of why it's like a lot of people come to astrology and human design from the lens of hypervigilance and they want forecasting,
Mm-hmm.
which I think it's like, but like, but am I going to be okay? Like, like, or even tarot, like they don't want
Mm.
to know, oh, how not, I mean, I'm being very broad, but I just think when people think if they are not doing, if they're not really um interested in the study of it like a layperson. I feel like the negative viewpoint of tarot and
Mm.
astrology is that like people just wanting to know the future and like
Yeah.
it's stupid, it's not real, but
Mm-hmm.
it's really a study of yourself. It's another window into knowing yourself. So
Yeah.
if you're looking at it from that perspective, you can see it's like, oh my God, it's endless and amazing, and you can learn so much.
Exactly.
Yeah, but if you're
Exactly.
coming at it from hypervigilance and wanting to just, which I understand, I mean, I have a very strong hypervigilant inner child growing up with a narcissistic mother, um, but yeah, I think that's why it gets a bad rap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Also, yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like we just jumped in, and I
Hmm.
want to kind of bring us into maybe more of a logical
Mm,
opening like pathway in the trail that
okay.
we're walking. And so
Okay.
I just want to have you introduce yourself
Oh,
before we
okay.
go further into the world of energy and psychic development.
Okay. Your
Um,
Virgo rising is like, we've gone too far down the path.
I'm
We
just
need to
mindful
find
that
where
there
we
may be
came in.
people who are like, "Who is Natasha?" So
Oh,
I want to
yeah.
have you
No, it's good.
introduce
It's good.
yourself. Yeah, just tell us a little bit about you, and then we can talk more about your
Yeah.
what you've been thinking about.
Okay. Yeah. So, maybe obviously I'm a Pisces rising. I already mentioned the Libra moon, Aquarius sun. Yeah, just want to say that. So who am I? Always with that broad, when that question, it always feels like, where do I begin? Again, the Pisces rising. Where's my opening? Where's my trail? So I guess in terms of why we're here today, I will say that I've been doing the psychic tools, energy tools for I learned it 20, oh my God, 3 years ago. Holy shit.
Wow.
I know. Isn't that crazy? That is wild. So my path to it was truly that I had a highly narcissistic mother who really I didn't know who I was as a result because I had to, in order to survive, there was a lot of emotional abuse and I had to be like her and please her. And when I found this, I had done some therapy and I had even done some inner child work. I also do inner child healing. I wrote a book on inner child healing. But it was really finding this kind of energy work where I became very familiar with my chakras and my aura and my energy system that I was able to know who I am
Mm,
and also feel like that it was good and and valuable. Well, it did take me a while to really love myself, but it was more like actually taking the value judgment out of it. It was more like undeniable that
mm,
no, but this is who I am, even without like loving myself yet or accepting myself yet. It was like,
mm,
and so it did feel valuable to know that and to feel, oh, when my mom is rejecting me, for instance, for divorcing somebody that she likes. and then didn't speak to me for months. Like it was like, oh, but I could feel my energy going to her, and then I would feel depleted and bad.
Yes.
And then when I would know how to clear her energy out of my chakras and my system, I had more confidence to know, oh, but this is who I am, and I don't want to deplete myself by trying to get her back or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, the yeah, so that's like it really is this kind I when I think of myself, I try not to get too much in definitions actually and identifying too much with any identity really. Um but but um but what I have always felt is this connection to um like the other realms. And
Mm.
I would say source even,
Yeah.
but I will just go on a little bit more of a tangent about myself is when I was 5, this one experience I had was my mom was being not nice to me and then she left the room and I heard really strongly, this isn't okay and it's not your fault and you will be stronger because of this. And I was like,
Mm.
oh, and that's when I started my relationship with God really, or like source and like, but
Beautiful.
then later, years later, I do so much time travel work where I go back to my inner child and
Mm.
I realized, oh my God, that was me. So
Mm-hmm.
this is like, yeah, even identifying as someone who loved, when I realized like, oh, it shifted like, oh, yes, I love my connection to source, but also, wow, it's all shifting all the time,
Mm-hmm.
like how I'm looking
Mm-hmm.
at things. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's something about how our relationship to God or source is also really connected to our vantage point in a particular moment of our
yes, yes.
journey, right? Because what I'm hearing from your story is perhaps when you were little, you didn't really have the confidence and you didn't have the um, self-worth on a human level. Like
Yeah.
you weren't connected to that sense of self-worth, right? You always had self-worth, but you weren't consciously connected to it because of your
Mm-hmm.
childhood, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
So it was perhaps it made more sense to see it as this external omniscient thing, right? And then from
Mm-hmm.
the perspective of you as an adult, maybe then it makes more sense for you to see it more as part of who you are. I think that that voice, though, that experience of hearing that voice, regardless of the mental coding we put on it, the
Mm-hmm.
experience just is, right?
Yeah.
Like that is the experience of feeling into, yeah, a connection with a larger power that is beyond, but actually is deeply
Us.
connected to our experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, you're reminding me of another thing that happened to me when I was 17. I went to see my friend. Anyway, that part doesn't matter, but I was smoking weed and I was talking to God like I used to do. And and I realized that my experience of it was shifting and like this God
Mm,
that I was talking to was bolder and like more confident and kind of encouraging me in a different way. And I was like, oh my God, I am God. Like that's my higher self. That isn't, I've been
mm,
talking to what I thought was an external thing, exactly what you're saying, but
yeah.
it's me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So that, yeah,
yeah.
I think it's always shifting. But what makes me feel good is that I do feel there is always available to us a wiser, more expansive
Mm-hmm,
energy out there that
mm-hmm,
can, and also that we're part of. I'm saying out there, but yes, we are also part of it. But when we're in our little ego, human form, it's harder to feel that.
yeah, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. I am curious to hear you talk more about psychic development and psychic
Hmm.
tools and specifically, what do you mean when you say psychic development?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's funny because I've always kind of avoided that word again
Mm,
because the word psychic, and I've always said energy healing tools in the past. And I realized like I was really skirting around that word because of actually what I said before. I feel like there's a misunderstanding, first of all, that psychic means telling the future.
mm,
And also, there's a negative connotation with it.
mhm,
But I felt more like owning, I don't know, over the last couple months, especially, I've been more and more like less bothered, I'll say, by what people's perception of all of this is.
mm,
Um, like yeah, anyway, I mean, because I do have a podcast called Getting to Know Woo that is about destigmatizing all these tools because I am passionate about that. It really bothers me how stigmatized it is because of how helpful it is, but
mm,
I've gone off on tangent. So um for me, psychic, how I define it is really what we've said. It's using your whatever senses are most available to you, but then you can develop other senses to know yourself deeply on a subtle energy body level
mhm,
and take care of. And the better you know yourself, it's just like when you go to therapy, like typical therapy, and you know your mind better, you know the intellectual reasons better, it can help you, like especially for me, understanding narcissism was very
mm,
helpful for me
mhm.
to understand who I was growing up in that.
Yeah.
And then this is a different way to approach it, basically, a different way to know and heal yourself.
Mhm,
And I think a lot of people have been trained into thinking it's for other people,
mm,
that you have to be born with it, or you just have to, like, yeah, have this extreme sensitivity. But anybody can know themselves in this way, and that's really exciting.
yes. Yes. Something that you and I have been in conversation with as well is how training ourselves in intuitive or psychic skills won't necessarily turn us into all the same kind of psychic, right? Because our intuition
Mm,
does speak to us in different ways. And so, something I've been becoming aware of in the past few months is how these tools are really gateways for us to understanding ourselves better,
yeah,
understanding our perception better, and to
yeah.
hone our perception using those skills, right? And tools. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think actually everybody, well, I feel like so many people are really sensitive and they don't know
Mm,
it. And they
mm-hmm.
walk around picking up on everybody else's energies and
Yes.
don't know it. And they think it's theirs, or they think that they're just um like, oh, well, that's just how it is. And yeah, you don't have to, you can empower yourself to not do that, and to yeah, have your own experience separate that from other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think,
And
and also, go ahead. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say there's also like the fun part of it. And I feel like I get self-conscious when like it sounds like I'm just like promoting my class, but it's just really on my mind right now. So that's
Yeah.
why I'm mentioning it so much. But um like also part of it is really having fun with your own existence and like enjoy, like it is magical and fun
Mm,
to know yourself as an energetic body.
mm-hmm.
Sorry about my dogs. Can you
I
hear
can't
them?
hear it.
Oh, you can't. Okay.
I can't hear it.
Um yeah, as an energetic body as well as, you know, your physical self.
Mm.
It's like so part of when I'm going to start people with in my class is to have an experience with their playful inner child because
Mhm.
we've been so, again, I feel like there's a lot of training around it's for other people. And so a lot of people, when they're starting to learn their own energetic system, it's easy to get in your head like there's some way to do this, and I'm not the kind of person who can do this.
Yeah.
So if you're connecting to the play of it all,
Mm.
I mean, this is one of the to me fun and like exciting things about it is that the gateway to it is through play. It's through
Mhm.
creativity and really, yeah, anybody can do that, but you just have to like we all have a playful inner child in there, that's like, ooh, that's connected to our system,
Mhm.
our energetic
Mhm.
system,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
actually, yeah. I mean, part of how I got so connected with inner child work is because when I started doing this work and reading people's energy, I would always see the inner child there.
Mm. Mhm.
Um, so, and it was usually the wounded inner child behind, whatever was coming up, only because people come to me for things they're, wanting healing with. So that's the part I would see. But there's
Yeah.
also the joyful one that's like,
Mm.
ooh, let's play with our aura,
Mhm.
and it's
Mhm.
like when you're a kid and you're really in it, like in that little, I'm picturing them in like a sandbox. They're not, usually most kids aren't like, well, that's not really a rabbit, that's sand, you know, like most kids are like, well, right now it's a rabbit.
Yes.
And it's like
Exactly.
that's how you discover
Mm.
real things, quote unquote real. I mean, what is
Mhm.
reality? But yeah.
You know, that's a great segue to something I have been thinking about as you're speaking, which is to me, part of the beauty of working on psychic skills or intuitive development is you also get to expand you get to expand beyond the limited framework of what reality means that you've been
Yes.
given, right, by
Yes.
people around you. And it's really interesting because to me that's part of the conditioning, actually, right? Because when, as
Yeah.
you pointed out, when we were little kids, we just knew that there was this whole other world out there. And to me, kids were not making it up, they were
Yeah.
perceiving something, right?
I
And I
like that.
think the awakening of that perception or the remembering of that perception is what's so beautiful um, about learning more about the skill, because at first, I think a lot of us, when we first found this work, it's kind of like we're a little sheepish about it,
Yeah.
and we're like, is that true? Like, am I really seeing what I'm
Yes.
seeing? Right. And then learning to slowly validate that you can, first and foremost, perceive. And then
Hmm.
from that point, maybe refining it more so that your perception is grounded and
Yes.
your perception is really your own lens rather than the lens of some trauma or some framework that someone taught you before, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think you and I both, to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the way we both learned this kind of work, it was really rooted in first being as neutral as possible, like
Yeah.
coming to it from like finding your energetic neutral.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, yeah, like that center of the head, you
Yes.
know.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that you aren't, I mean, I know the most neutral I ever am is when I'm giving readings,
Yeah.
because I'm
Yeah.
consciously like, okay, I'm sitting here, I'm finding the center in my head, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
separate from you,
Mm-hmm.
and here we go. And
Mm-hmm.
you also know that when you're triggered, it's harder to read your own energy, or
Yeah.
it's like harder to read the situation.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
I want to hear more about your idea and experience and perception about neutrality, Natasha. What do
Mm.
over the many years you've been doing this,
Hmm.
what have you learned about neutrality? Mm-hmm.
Mm. It's so. interesting you asked me that because I just read this quote that I was like, oh my God, I have to put this in my newsletter because it was something along the lines of like, neutrality is not a stagnant space.
Mm,
It's I'm gonna butcher it, but it's basically that it's like this open space where anything is possible and it's an alive space.
yeah.
And I think maybe I feel like I keep saying like people think this, like I'm, but I'm just like,
But I think
uh,
you have a good point though, because I do feel like in my own experience and in my
hmm
own exploration and talking to different people, I do think there tends to be a certain lens that people place on this idea of neutrality that
hmm
isn't aligned with my experience of neutrality ultimately. You know, it's
mm.
coming more maybe from the mental space, but go ahead.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I want to hear what you think too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's this space I think maybe neutrality gets a bad rap and I think so does acceptance. Like just
Mm-hmm.
accept where you are. You are where you are means that you have to then just like deal with a shitty circumstance.
Yeah, or like take abuse, right? I think that's what
hmm
people think acceptance
hmm
means, which to me is not.
No.
Being a doormat is not equivalence to being, it's not the equivalence of acceptance. It's actually
Yes.
very different. Hmm.
It's a doorway. It is like neutral. It's basically neutrality. It's allowing yourself to be where you are
Yeah.
instead of being in resistance to it.
Hmm.
So then you can actually experience what you're feeling. You can experience what's actually happening. And that's maybe
Hmm.
neutrality is another word for acceptance as I'm talking about it here. Like
Mm.
it's being, excuse me, it also reminds me of how I read something about where someone was talking about how being regulated doesn't mean that you're calm and just
Hmm.
like you can be angry and regulated and you can
Yes.
actually be angry and accepting of your situation and you can be angry and neutral. You can be
Hmm.
like, oh, I'm aware of everything that's happening here or a lot of what's happening here and I'm not, basically, to me, I guess neutral is the opposite of being merged with an inner child
Yeah.
part that's triggered, that's, looking at it through a lens, through a mindset of the past, whatever that may be.
Beautiful.
But I
Yeah.
think also that, I mean, like I have a friend who struggles with her business. She just started a business
Hmm.
and when I have talked to her about that concept of allowing yourself to be where you are, at first she had a lot of resistance because she thought that meant she was just going to
Mm.
have to accept that her business was failing.
Hmm.
But like actually, the truth is that when she accepted where she is, then when she accepts where she is, then she can see all the ways her business is actually thriving.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this neutrality concept is actually allows you to move out and have a bigger perspective. And
Hmm.
that reminds me actually of what we were talking about, how being connected to source or spirit guides that are not in a body, they are actually, my experience with my guides is they're pretty neutral.
Hmm.
They just have a really wide perspective.
Yes.
So they're not like, oh
Exactly.
my God, I think I've talked to you about this. Maybe this was on WhatsApp that um about how like spirit guides aren't like if spirit guides were codependent, like your spirit guides are never like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, don't do that, don't do that, don't do
Yeah.
that. Like, please, I'm gonna intervene here. I'm gonna intervene. They're never like that. They're just like, oh, okay, yeah, that's where you are. All right. Well, what about if you thought about it like this?
Uh-huh.
That's
Uh-huh.
neutrality. And there's so much love from them in neutral.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you brought that example of your friend because I think it's always really helpful to ground it in an
Mm,
actual example, right?
yeah.
Because what I was perceiving as you were telling that story is how your friend is pretty new at creating this business, right? And so this perspective of like, oh, it should be at this point, at this time, is actually maybe coming more from a mental perspective
Yeah.
that is informed by other people's opinions, right? And so
Mm,
other people's opinions have clouded their perception. And then as they release their attachment to what other people might think, and all these other ways that other people told them this is what successful business looks like, they're able to make space for like, my business is currently just starting, right? And so
yes.
it's it's like my child, like I wouldn't expect my child to dress themselves and go to school by themselves when they were like 2 years old.
Right.
Of course I have to take care of them. Of course, I have to
Right.
bathe them. Of course, I have to feed them, right? Because it's just where they're at. And I think to me, neutrality is not the same as objectivity.
Mm.
To me,
Mm-hmm.
neutrality is actually making more space for one's experience
Yeah.
and releasing our maybe attachment to what other people think about our experience or what we have been taught we should feel about our current experience and be with where we are right now. Yeah, I think my sense is that neutrality is when we give ourselves space to have our own experience and to, in a way, detach from the lens of what other people think about us or what we imagine other people think about us. And that usually that imagination is based on what we've been taught about what's right and wrong in society, you know?
Yeah.
So,
And by our parents and or formative relationships or yeah.
exactly, exactly. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Yeah, I think it is like just the opposite of being because when we're merged with inner child parts, those parts have ideas about how what they need to do and be in order to stay safe. You
mm,
know, who they have to be, or, it is associating with an identity really of like, oh, I have to be this kind of person or that kind of person in order to be
yes.
safe.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
So yeah, so being able to come into neutrality, you can see those inner child parts like, oh, that's sad that they feel that way, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And let's just that's also why I think um if you're having a hard time, let's say you're wanting to embody we'll just use the business example again, like you're wanting to embody someone who's really feels great about their business and is in such a great, like, feels like, oh, things are flowing and people love what I'm offering, whatever it is, and you're having a hard time getting there because you're in that space of what I was saying, how my friend was, where it's like nothing's working. The best way to get from A to C is B, neutrality, and to be like,
Mm,
well, this is where I am. I
yeah.
am here, because then you're not fighting it. You're just like, this is this is happening. This is
Mm-hmm.
where, and then owning that and being you are where you are, that, like I said before, you start to see, oh, well, actually, everything isn't terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And also, another example I just want to give in terms of
Mm-hmm.
acceptance that I think is really important, and neutrality is like, for me, years ago, I was in this really bad relationship and I knew I wanted to leave, but I just kept fighting. I kept trying to make him someone he wasn't. And I
Mm,
was like, oh, why is he so mean to me or whatever it is? And I realized, like, oh, I don't feel, I've talked about this before. Hopefully, I haven't. I'm like not repeating myself to you, but I realized that I need to accept him for who he is.
mm,
And that, again, like you said before, that doesn't mean I should just accept abuse,
mm-hmm.
but I couldn't get from I'm leaving him and I'm totally fine. I couldn't get from, oh, I want to be with him, but he's not being how I want to be, and I'm leaving him. I'm
Mm.
okay to leave him. I had
Mm-hmm.
to first go to B, which was okay, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
And I realized, I mean, he wasn't physically abusing me. So I will say, I wouldn't recommend this if you're like your life is in danger. It's important to say.
Yes.
But I was in a place where I was like not ready to go. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to work on myself until I'm ready to go. And I'm not going to fight that this is what's happening.
Mm.
So that's just another way, like, okay, yep, this is what he's doing. I don't like
Mm.
how I feel right now.
Mm-hmm.
And allowing myself to do that gave me the strength to go because otherwise I was just fighting it and then I stay stuck. And people do this in
Mm-hmm.
1,000 ways. I've done this in 1,000 ways, different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard a lot of stories similar to this on an energetic level
Mm.
with regards to people and their relationship with their jobs, actually.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Where they're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I can sense this job is not a great fit for me, but maybe there are very concrete reasons why I can't leave this job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very practical reasons. And so coming to that place of not, of holding the tension really, right? Between like, oh,
Yes.
this job's not the best match for me. I'm not going to stay here for the next 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I still have these practical concerns. And how do I be in the middle and just hold that tension and let myself move on when the time is right?
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Allowing yourself to be where you are. And I
Yeah.
do think that feeling your energy is so important in that because when you are in those kind of situations, you can get drained really easily,
Mm.
not just from fighting it, but well, yeah. I mean, I think when we fight where we are, we give away more than we mean to. And when you are
Mm.
able to, at least, like, let's say you're in that kind of job and you can't leave it yet, or you don't want to, if you are aware of your energy at least, then you don't get as drained. You have more of yourself. You're not just like
Yes.
giving it all away. You
Yeah.
know who you are. Yeah.
Hmm. I'm curious, Natasha, what would you say to people in terms of maybe becoming aware of their energy
Hmm.
when they are in states of trauma responses? Like, if, for example, you notice yourself in a fight or in a flight or in a freeze or in a fawn, what are some of the ways that maybe you can um, recommend people to become more aware of their energy in that state of activation? Hmm.
Yeah. So there are different ways with each trauma response, but if we're just going to say like, okay, I don't even know what trauma response I'm in, I just know I'm triggered or
Or I'm feeling
activated.
really bad. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What I really like is softening your gaze and just tuning into your physical body.
Mm.
Um, it's kind of both. You're tuning into your physical body, but also your energetic body. So what I like is to just like do a body scan essentially of putting your attention softly on your feet and just noticing, oh, like, can I feel my skin? Can I feel my bones? Can I feel
Mm.
like the energy in my feet? Like
Yeah.
just softening it and going through your body. And then also, um, if your body is too triggering, if it's like, oh, I can't even do that, softening your gaze around your environment. Like, can you notice like, let's say you're sitting in the middle of a room. Can you notice even the door at the other end of the room? Can you put your
Mm.
attention behind you and the wall behind you? It's
Mhm.
just this softening because really what you're needing is safety.
Mm.
And again, when you're merged with a part, which is what's happening, in my opinion, when you're triggered, when you're activated like that, um, their perspective takes over. And
Mm.
so if you can widen your perspective to even your more than your physical body around you, like if you're familiar with your aura, you can say, like, can I just gently feel my aura around me or just intend to feel my aura 18 inches around me?
Yeah.
But also when you're doing the body scan, yes, you're noticing your body, but it's with more, it's a widening anyway, because you're noticing like, oh, you're, how often do we pay attention to like really our skin or our
Mm.
bones, or like the
Yeah.
energy in our body?
Right.
We
Right.
usually don't. So, yeah. And I also like that practice for widening your awareness. And that's really what energy is. Energy, like the system that I'm talking about is widening your perception. So
Mm.
I like that just as a general practice anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Mm-hmm.
helps quiet the mind.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Because
And
then you
when,
are
yeah, you're,
feeling more of you, right? Mm-hmm.
yeah. Yeah, because you have a Gemini moon
Mm-hmm.
that fast. Is your mind like do, 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 do,
All the
do?
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something I've really actually has been so interesting because I'm an Aquarius, so also my mind does that. Um, um, is that the more I've been doing this softening, and it's such a
Mm.
silly thing that got me into this because I got this ring that says stay soft. I wrote about this in my newsletter, but
Mm.
I just was drawn to it the second I saw it, and I've been wearing it every day, and
Mm.
it's like become my life motto. I'm just like, oh yeah, like you can always soften, and softening doesn't mean like, you've become like, oh, now I'm feeling everything. It's actually, again, when you broaden, you're moving out of these activated parts and you're
Mm.
widening your perspective.
Yeah.
So I like this practice just in general. Oh, what I was going to say is I've noticed that I'm more able to watch really actually the energy of those fast thoughts
Mm.
when I have this wider perspective.
Yeah, that makes
So I'm just
sense.
like, oh, it almost feels like I'm watching like a bunch of ants, like
Yeah.
really fast moving to get a piece of a crumb or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, look at them. They're going so fast.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's really aligned with my experience too. I think for
Mm,
me, I also notice when I'm really in that wider perspective, I see how circular my thought patterns can get. And
yeah.
then it's more about working with the whirlpool of my thought patterns and seeing more of what's at the core rather than getting sucked into the pool, you know?
Yeah, well, what I find is when you notice your thoughts doing that and they're like, "Doo-doo-doo-doo," and you're just like not even attaching anything to the content of them, just
Mm,
like there's another practice called thought labeling where you
mm,
can also just label, oh, that's an anxiety thought. That's a,
yeah,
whatever thought. But
right.
I just like watching them and I keep losing my train of thought, Jonathan. This is awful. Wait, hold on. I was saying
Take
when
your
I'm
time.
when I'm watching the thoughts, what? Oh, okay. When I'm watching the thoughts and I'm not attaching a story to it, what
Mm,
I notice is then I'll feel a feeling come up.
mm,
And that is, I think, what you're talking about, getting to the core of it. Like that. And then again, from my perspective, that's an inner child feeling. And I don't even have to understand it. It's just like, oh, there go those thoughts. And it's like, ooh, okay, well, there's a feeling.
mm,
And then the thoughts really want to come in and be like, well, that feeling is about you're gonna just really fail this thing or whatever it
yeah,
is. Really want
right,
to attach a meaning to the feeling.
right.
And then it's just like, oh yeah, there they go. Like, oh, just like letting yourself feel that feeling and letting that
Mm-hmm.
move through you.
Yeah.
And often for me, compassion comes with that feeling. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, that's a feeling, and I can have compassion on top of it.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
trying to understand it is often where we get in trouble and the whole thing
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
comes to a halt.
Yeah, yeah. It's been huge for me to notice the difference between when I am thinking and when I'm perceiving because it's
Mm-mm-mm.
actually really different. I
What do you
feel like
mean?
thinking is trying to write a novel about it, trying to write a
Yeah.
treatise or like a theoretical
Yeah.
thesis about it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas to me, when I'm perceiving things, I'm just letting myself hear my story. I'm hearing
Yeah.
like, oh, this is the story that's coming up. Fascinating.
It's
You know?
neutrality again.
Yeah. And then again, actually, this is something that I think you have taught me actually around having the inner adult or inner parent in the room, right? And how the presence of that inner parent for me in my practice feels like curiosity.
Hmm.
If my mind is making up all these stories about what something means or what a particular sensation means, um, my experience is that when I bring in inner parent, my inner parent is able to be like, okay, what do you think that means about you? What does
Mm-hmm.
this story, what is your brain telling you this particular experience means about you, right? Like,
Hmm.
let me give an example. Maybe I was just hanging out with a friend, and then something I said, I felt on a deeper level that it impacted the person. Right. And then
Hmm.
I left the call. Maybe I didn't talk about it because I could have talked about it with them in that moment. Right. And
Hmm.
kind of check in with them, but maybe I didn't have that chance. And so when I log off the Zoom call or I leave that hangout, sometimes there's a part of me that feels like, oh, is this friend now going to hate me? Are they going to come after me?
Hmm.
And I notice when I'm in the mode of perception rather than in thinking, I can see the
Hmm.
story. And then there's this other voice that comes in and goes like, well, okay, say your friend is mad about you. What does that say about you as a person?
Hmm.
And then I would go deeper into, oh, if I say something that impact my friend or makes them feel sad, then I'm scared that that means that I'm a bad person, right?
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
this other voice would ask again, what do you think it means if you think you're a bad person? And then I'm like, oh, then all of my friends will leave me alone, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
that voice is like, okay, maybe that was your experience when you were, I don't know, in
Hmm.
fifth grade. Is
Yeah.
that true now? And then I would tune in and I'd be like, not really.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know? Yeah.
Yeah. What's
Uh-huh.
so helpful to do in that case too is to just validate. That also calms down the
Mm.
system, I find. Like
Mm-hmm.
immediately be like, oh yeah, you're really worried that
Yeah.
your friend hates you now.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
feels really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And like
Mm-hmm.
even just saying that often I find calms the part down. It's like, yeah. And
Mm.
then it's like your whole energy system calms down, your nervous system,
Yeah.
and then you get less attached to that story. Because,
Definitely.
yeah, the more attached you are to the story, the more the whole world takes on that. It's wild how it's just like colors everything. It's like putting like that color, like taking red dye in clear water and just it spreads.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, how do you get back to that clear water?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really think validating is helpful. The other thing I want to say about perception is um, I learned recently from this person I was seeing for Rolfing.
Mm.
She was saying that first, when let's say you're triggered by something, actually, first you feel the sensation. And
Mm.
then, like in your body, it's like a sensation in your body. And then it's the feeling. And then the thoughts come up, like to make meaning out of it.
Yeah.
And so, like, even zooming out a little further, because she didn't really do much energy work, I would say that first the sensation is felt on an energy level,
Mm.
and then you feel it in your body
Mm-hmm.
on a body level as a sensation, and then your body. So, and then a feeling, and then the thought. So, if you really, it's so hard, especially with hypervigilance, because that part is like, we have to think this out. We have to think this out. Like, we can't, like, it's not safe to just go, like, not try to figure this out. But
Mm.
if you can let that part know, like, I know you're really scared, but we're going to just feel this on a feeling level first, on a, like, see if you can feel like, the sensation in your aura or the sensation in your body, and then like the like coming at it that way
Mm, mm.
helps like break up the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my next thing. Like I talk about hypervigilance constantly on TikTok because I'm obsessed with it, ironically. I
Mm.
say ironically because hypervigilance is such an obsessive part, but I'm like, I want to break this down so much, like all the ways it shows up. What's the core? So, like, we can just like, because that part, it really is like it puts off this alarm in your body. It's like, when you're walking down the
Mm-hmm.
street and a siren's like, "Vrr, vrr," you can't focus on anything else. It's so loud.
Yeah.
That's like hypervigilance in your system. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, I'm really
Mm-hmm.
obsessed with breaking that down.
Yeah. Do you think hypervigilance is something that we experience more in 2024 because we live within a culture that is always seeking dopamine hits?
I
Do you think
feel
there's a
like,
connection there?
yeah, I bet there is. I feel like there's so many reasons. I mean, the pandemic certainly didn't help anything.
Mm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
literally, we were like, we're all going to die unless we. I mean, there
Yeah.
was just so much of that energy in the collective. And like I said before, like we're all energetic systems. And if we don't know how to disconnect from the societal energy, from systemic energy, then we're all picking up on that all the time.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then, of course, there's the, personal. And then how are we going to relate to each other if that energy is going around and we're holding it unconsciously?
Yeah.
And then there's the, like dealing with it personally. I feel like, yeah. I mean, I wasn't obvious. Well, in this body, I wasn't around before, like in the 1600s or something. But, but I do wonder, if like, it seems to me if we were more just like with the earth, and
Mm.
I mean like really more connected
Mm-hmm.
and slowing down in general, I do think things have just gotten really sped up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I tell one quick little story
Yeah.
about that reminds me of that. Um I had this client a couple months ago, who I've never seen this before, but I saw a past life with them where they were a dinosaur on
Mm.
the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so wild. I was like, oh my God. I've never talk about imagination, being able to trust your like imaginative abilities.
Yeah.
I've never seen anyone as a dinosaur. But what was so beautiful about it was the earth was um so alive. It was
Mm.
just I was like, oh, I just wanted to spend time in that world. It was
Mm.
so beautiful and so the opposite of hypervigilance. It was like, oh, well, this may be another reason for hypervigilance is that in that on earth back then it was like everything was give and take and reciprocal, and like I know that
Mm.
animals were killing each other and that is scary, but but there really was just this energy of like giving, and now there's just, when we're living in this world that's so dominated by, and I'm not like anti money or anything, but when it's become like, capitalism is the system where like there's only enough, it's just scarcity,
Mm-hmm.
and there is, and so many people are it's just like how much tiny percent of people are rich. And there's just, that creates this energy of hypervigilance because like, how am I going to, even my kids, they're teenagers and they're like, how am I going to survive in the world?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I didn't mean to bring us down at the end here.
Oh no. I
Okay.
mean, I think this is part of the work too, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
something I've been thinking a lot about is that idea actually of disconnecting from collective,
Trauma.
not just trauma, but I really
Mm.
feel like the word that keeps coming to me is Maya. Like it's
Mm.
this illusion, this story we are perpetuating, but becomes real because of how we relate to it. right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
collective agreement. That's
Yeah, yeah,
exactly what it
yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And something I'm thinking about is how, the true nature of life is really interdependence, right? So we can't actually
Yes.
technically disconnect from one another. Like it's impossible. Like we're
Right.
always connected.
Yes.
And I think that the experience of making more space for more of us to come online
Yeah.
naturally has this side effect of creating differentiation from the collective, right? This is
Mm-hmm.
something I've heard one of my mentors, Diana Rose Harper, talking a lot about, which is differentiation is not the same as separation.
Yeah, yeah,
Separation
yeah.
is actually not the truth. Separation is just a story we tell ourselves as modern people, right? As
Mm-hmm.
people within capitalist structures, as people within this westernized idea about individualism that isn't part of the reality of the world, because even when we look at quantum physics, for example, we're actually all very connected, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's no getting out of it. Like whether you
Right.
like it or not, you can't get out of it.
Yeah.
And also, I do think that part of what I've learned a lot from, walking the path of practicing some of these psychic or energetic tools is that they help us create more space and also allow more of us to be inhabited within the body. And this is,
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts about this, Natasha, because you brought in Rolfing a moment ago. And to me, embodiment from a somatic perspective is slightly different than embodiment from an energy perspective, because what I've seen and what I've tracked in the collective is that there are a lot of people who practice um, somatic tools,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the orientation within the somatic world is more around feeling your emotions, right? Which I think
Mm-hmm.
is beautiful and I think is necessary for the health of the system.
Mm-hmm.
However, when you are feeling your feelings, are those feelings yours or other people's? And I think that
Mm.
is not a tool that is present within the framework of the somatic work
Oh my
that
God, yeah.
I feel like in the psychic development world is very, I feel like the psychic development community or world or intuitive development have more tools and framework around this, right? Because a lot of what we do
Mm.
when we're doing energy work is we make space within the person's energetic body to be able to inhabit more of their spirit, for their spirit to be more inhabited within the energetic body. I feel like I've just said a lot of words. I'm
No,
curious if
no,
you
no,
have
no.
thoughts around that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it comes back to what I was talking about originally and who I am, and that I was able to separate and know who I was when I knew my energetic body, when I knew where my
Mm,
aura ended and started. And that, I mean, that one practice alone was so shifting. And also, um, like, yeah, helped me to know, like, it helped me to be aware of when I was merging with my mother or when she was critical of me. I would feel it energetically,
mm,
not just like, oh, I feel all these, I hate myself now. It was like, oh, wait, no, this is a foreign energy in my body right now.
mm.
Not that
Yes.
and then of course, like we talked about, the stories come in with the mind and that gets confusing, but I knew it was happening.
Hmm.
And something also like, I'll give an example from my life. Just the other day, I went to go meet someone, and I started to notice I was feeling really anxious. And
Mm,
um in the past I would have been like, oh, okay, I'm just socially anxious, okay, I'll try to soothe myself, but I was like, oh, I'm going to make sure my aura is closed. So
mm,
I have been doing this thing actually since I taught my grounding class of zipping up my aura and just imagining from the ground up like it's a jacket or something. I was like, whoop,
mhm.
got to zip up my aura.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, I'm not anxious anymore. So I
Mm,
was picking up on their anxiety, or maybe it was the
mhm.
anxiety of someone else in the restaurant or whatever. But
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we pick up on other people's energy all the time. I agree
Yeah.
with you
Yeah.
that, yeah, I love that you articulated it that way because,
Mm-hmm.
and also in terms of picking up, differentiating
Mm.
between, the, collective anxiety, let's say. I
Yeah.
mean, that's something that I did constantly.
Mm-hmm.
This practice that I'm about to say, I did constantly during the beginning of the pandemic. I would just imagine I kind of felt into what does the collective energy feel like around the pandemic,
Mm.
and I pictured it above me, and then I would just see, do I have any cords going to this? And of course I did, and then whoop, took the cords out, and then
Yeah.
redirected my cord
Yeah.
so that I wasn't getting my information. I
Mm.
took my cord from my crown, which is your higher knowing, and I put it into my higher knowing. So yeah, I mean, we do that all the time, I
All
think.
the time.
Yeah.
All the time. Sometimes I
Yeah.
would be watching YouTube videos, Natasha, and I notice myself cording from my crown to the
Yes.
person who's talking on the YouTube
Yeah.
video.
Oh, all the time. Oh
All
my
the time.
God. We have been, my 17-year-old and I have been uh, binge watching Vanderpump Rules constantly. So, and I will, if I don't separate my energy from Vanderpump Rules,
Ooh,
I will go
yeah.
to bed and dream about them, hear their voices in my head. I've, I've had people really say to me before, like worried that they're schizophrenic or something, because they'll be like, I leave someone's house and then I'll hear their voice in my head. I'm like, oh no, you're just
Mm.
sensitive. You just need to, like, your energy's just picking up on that. You just need to
Yes.
separate from them. That's all.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I love that you point that out, that like you can easily be feeling, I could be feeling Sheena's energy from Vanderpump Rules if I'm not careful. And I'll like put up my gold roses between me and the TV, which
Yeah.
is like the separation roses,
Uh-huh.
so that I'm not picking up on it. I can
Yeah.
still enjoy it.
Yeah. Yes, you can enjoy it from the
Mhm.
perspective of being fully in your aura and in your energy,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And you can kind of watch it. You can make space for your experience, but allow that experience to be distinct or differentiated from their experience, and then
Exactly.
that is super fun.
Yeah. Then we can just enjoy it. And
Yeah.
I said to um my child, I was like, "Are you dreaming about these people?" And they were like, "Yes." And I was like, "Okay, we need to separate."
Oh my god. I love this so much. Yes. Yes, very real. And I
Yeah.
think that that experience of being so merged or having so
Hmm.
many of other people's energies, like I experience this with Instagram all the time. I would have dreams,
Yes.
Natasha, if I don't separate from my phone before I sleep, I would have
Hmm.
dreams about these cat memes. It's crazy.
Well, cat memes are good.
They are
No, and
good. They're
yeah,
wholesome, but
I'll
but
accept
still.
that one. Yeah, yeah. You still want your own experience.
Yeah.
No, Instagram especially, this is the other thing about energy work is
Mm.
it really helps you trust yourself without
Mm.
needing an
Mhm.
answer
Yeah.
intellectually. Like for
Yes.
me, I feel I can't be on Instagram now more than maybe 5 minutes.
Mm.
I think it all is just, yeah. So, and for whatever reason, I love TikTok. I enjoy it. It makes me happy. I feel good on there, and I don't have that same experience. I also have
Mhm.
boundaries, but like the almost sometimes it's like I'll be on there for 30 seconds on Instagram. I'm like, nope.
Mm.
And in the past, I've been like, oh, well, this is me. I just need to, I would blame myself, but it's like, no, I'm different. Like you said, I'm going to differentiate myself
Yeah.
from this energy. And
Mm.
sometimes it's so powerful when that happens. I mean, like the energy is just too strong that you do need to set an entire boundary of just not going on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Because I
Yeah.
rarely post on there. And then another example of that is like your job. Like you were saying before, like if you're feeling bad about your job, you can energetically make sure you're not merging with your job.
Oh, this is a big one. Mhm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, like removing cords, bringing your energy back,
Yeah.
coming
Yeah.
back into neutral, just energetically checking in with, okay, how do I feel at the start of the day? And
Mm.
especially if it's a challenging job like throughout the day. Okay, how am I feeling right now? Where's my energy? Yeah, just having that energetic hygiene.
Yes. Yes. I can literally talk to you forever, like 5 days straight, Natasha. But I'm mindful of our time, and so I
Yeah.
want to give you a little bit of space to talk about this offering. Can you talk a little
Oh,
bit more
thank
about
you.
it and,
Yeah.
what you plan to, the kind of experience you plan to kind of walk people through, guide people through,
Hmm.
and also, some of the tools that you want to teach through this particular offering.
Thank you. Yeah, it's called A Spell of Remembering because so many people forget that this is who they are. They
Mm,
have an energetic body, like
mm,
we've talked about here. It's so powerful to know it deeply. And that's really my goal. And it's, as I said in the beginning, my really, that and inner child healing, but it's just really exciting and precious to me, these tools.
mm,
I
mm,
didn't invent them. um I went to uh no well, I learned from a teacher who went to this school called Psychic Horizons.
mm.
This was again 23 years ago, so I didn't go directly there. They didn't have online stuff then, and it's not these exact. That's where I started to learn it, and then I have my
You
own take
create
on it.
your own. Yeah. I think that's
Yeah.
what I love about learning from you too, Natasha, because
Mm.
you are very inventive and you let yourself have your own, um, not even version, but like, I think you create your own pathways. And so, really, I think
Mhm.
when people are experiencing your offering, they're getting like the Natasha Levinger experience, you know?
That's nice. I
Yeah.
love
Which
that.
is, to me, that's like, that's beautiful, right? Because when we
Um,
come to a teacher, we're not just like learning a tool that's like dead, but we're learning it from the perspective of you. Yeah. Anyways, go on,
Thank you.
please.
Well, and I really do center people, like make sure that they're centering their own experience because, like we
Mm,
talked about, this kind of work is so personal.
yes.
So while it is, you know, we're learning the tools, but then in this class, if they want to, they can have a person to uh, practice with so
Mm,
they can pair up because it is like you were saying in the beginning when it is like imagination, but it's not like, you know, when you've given me an Akashic reading, sometimes you might say, like, I don't know why I'm getting this information, but this is what I'm getting. And it's like,
yeah,
yep, then I can validate that. But sometimes it feels like we're making it up.
totally.
That's what this like play feels like. So I do integrate inner child stuff in there because to me, you can't separate it.
Mm, hmm.
So there is a lot of that inner child dynamics in there. But we're going to learn about chords, about looking at like energy chords, seeing what we're chording. And we're going to do a deep dive into the chakras to see because we hold so much of our inner child stuff and just our beliefs in our chakras. So we're going to learn how to read them and how to clear them and how to separate. And um yeah, and the first class is going to be this grounding into how do you show up in your own particular way to read energy? Like how does your intuition show up? Does it, learning more about trusting and
Mm,
grounding, of course, in the aura and just the whole bevy of psychic tools.
that's amazing. This is
And
so exciting.
yes, I get so excited too about gathering with people.
Mm,
I love it because a lot of times I've been teaching lately, it's been pre-recorded, which has its own merits, but this kind of work is really important to do, I think, live. You can get the recording
mm,
if you have to miss a class or two, but I think it really is important because you can ask in the moment, like, okay, I can't feel my aura. And then I can kind of check, like, oh, I mean, depending on the size of it, I may not be able to check for everybody, but I can offer, like, check, is it across the room right now?
mm,
Maybe you can't feel
mm.
it because it's too spread out,
Yeah,
or is it super close to you, or,
yeah.
or like,
Mhm.
how do you sense certain things, So
Mhm.
that's this, it's helpful
Mm.
to do that way.
Amazing.
Yeah, so thank you.
Yeah. Um, what are some of the ways that people can find you across the internet and otherwise?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I should also say we're starting the first live class is March 25th.
Okay.
And then there is going to be pre-recorded just little bits so that you can come back to it and hear the practical
Hmm.
information.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
enrollment is open up until that day or like the night
yes.
before?
Right now
Hmm.
it's, well, I don't know when this is airing, but yes, it is open
Sometime
until
this
that
week.
day.
Hmm.
Yeah, okay. Um, and what am I saying? Oh, people can find me on my Substack, um, which is called Coming Home, and it's or NatashaLevinger.com. You can find everything on there and
Hmm.
on TikTok at
Okay.
Natasha Levinger.
Amazing.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Natasha. This has been so lovely. I just really enjoy talking with you and I
I
appreciate you.
appreciate. Oh, we almost said that at the same time. Jinx.
Jinx.